So welcome everyone to our Recast Right-Click Tools 4.4 release webinar. We're very happy to have you. This is our second webinar. We will be recording it, and then we will be posting it to YouTube, our blog, and sending out an email recap to everyone in case you missed anything. To get started, I'll go over what we'll cover today. We'll talk about the speakers, what's new in 4.4, walk through some of those actions for you guys, how to get the tools, and then we'll do an open Q&A if you guys have any questions about what you saw. Our speakers today are Mark and Brian. They'll be going through the new feature updates. They are both software engineers and on the development team here. Marty Miller is our customer success manager. He will be handling the Q&A, and he will be handling also any of your support tickets if you send them in to help you solve any of the problems that you have.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mark Godfrey, one of our software engineers here at Recast. So I just want to start by talking a little bit about the product in general. As I'm sure you're familiar with, because everyone is familiar with this part, we have this little pie chart here in front of you, and I'm going to start talking about this little productivity area. We have the client actions, the client tools, the console tools. These are all those all those actions you can quick run on devices that everyone uses. Everyone knows they exist, and we make updates to them periodically. Just to kind of keep them I guess up to date with modern technology, keep them running well for you guys. But what a lot of people don't realize is this is actually one small sliver in the entire pie. We have a lot more to offer in our tool set, especially once you start getting into the enterprise area. So once you have enterprise, you have access. The real power is mostly with the Recast management server, which gives you access to all kinds of dynamic ways to control how your actions are run, where they're run, and even more than that. For instance, you might not know that if you have a cloud management gateway, you can route actions over to the fast channel to devices connected through your CMG. We also have things like an agent that you could optionally run locally. So if you have issues such as maybe firewall ports that you can't open for some reason, or you don't want to give admin rights to your workers, you can have the agent running on their system. You can use a proxy that will work in regular domains, untrusted domains, so on and so forth. There's just so much extra you get. I even mentioned permissions and scoping said permissions in there as well. Brian will talk a little bit more about those later when he talks about the Recast management server. Another segment of the enterprise tools that's really helpful is the actual dashboards. We have 6 of those right now, and most of them focus on various compliance standards like your software updates, labs, Bitlocker, so on and so forth. And the real power is the actionable part of that, right? So we have tools that kind of associate with those. You can launch from the dashboard to help remediate that compliance. Going forward, we also have our I wouldn't call it an automation suite, I guess. It's Builder and Runner. It's basically like a workflow platform. You use Builder to make your automation workflows and Runner to run them. So if you have kind of mundane tasks that you don't like, you have to do on a regular basis, you can try using a lot of our actions to automate those. So essentially every one of our tools on the back end is running a combination of actions from this list of plugins that we have created. And we give you access to those in Builder so that you can make your own little workflows. And it might not be for full-blown automation. Some people build like their own right-click tools. So if you have a recurring issue in your environment, but your help desk kind of has problems remediating it, you can go in here and make your own little workflow, and then using the permissions model, give them access to that, and then they can run it when they see the issue pop up. Last but most definitely not least, we have Kiosk Manager. This is a nifty little tool for controlling, managing, locking down single-purpose devices, kind of like digital signage, computer labs, customer-facing kiosks, factory floor machines, and really a lot more. You can do things like set auto login for it on restart. You can replace the shell so that, for instance, it only launches a browser or another specified app that goes to a specific URL, so they can only access that on this machine, and even more than that. So definitely, if you have some time, you want to check out the rest of the enterprise product and you're not already a customer, maybe hop over to the website and you can always schedule a quick walkthrough with one of our product specialists. They love showing off the tools. But moving on for today, we're going to talk about 4.4. And by no means is this going to be an exhaustive list. If you actually saw our development sprints. There is a lot of work, and it's a lot more than 6 bullet points. But today we're going to cover some of the bigger changes. If you want to see the full-blown release notes, those are usually in Portal. You can pull those up. But today we'll start with our in-console dashboard improvements. We made a few changes, like some better UI controls for filtering the dashboards, some better error handling, and so on. We made some enhancements to the Bitlocker status tool, and going along with that, a single change to the Bitlocker dashboard, and then Bitlocker action for Builder. Every single one of these changes, Bitlocker related, are actually, funny enough, from the webinar we did in May. I believe it was May or June. We had this big series of all the dashboard webinars. We did one webinar for each dashboard. And the Bitlocker one, we got certain feedback, feature requests, so on and so forth from customers. And every single item that I could find that I thought would be a good add, we actually got in there. So if you have feedback, definitely don't hold it back. We actually have a nice little feature request board on our website you can check out. You can also, by all means, report bugs if you see those. We want to fix those. The management dashboards, Brian's going to show those off. Without giving away too much, essentially it brings some of the power of our in-console dashboards to the web, and he'll talk a lot more about that. He'll also go over Recast Management Server, a little bit of a high level, but also talk about some improvements we've made to it, especially in the UI area, and some minor bug fixes. Then this isn't something we're going to show off, but we wanted to kind of mention it. We have started a little bit of ServiceNow integration. This part's very minor. Basically, if you go to a device or user, you can right click on said device or user and just open it in ServiceNow. So it'll launch your browser and navigate to where that device or user is in ServiceNow, so you can check them out there. There is a setting you have to configure for that. It's the ServiceNow instance URL, obviously, because that's unique for every environment. If you have standalone configuration or standalone right-click tools, you can go into Recast Management Server and configure the setting there. Otherwise, if you're using Recast Management Server, you can globally consider this, set this setting for your entire environment through Recast Management Server. Lastly, we have fixed over 25 bugs. And I always kind of grimace when I say it because it makes it sound like we have lots of bugs in our tools. A lot of these are minor bugs, but when we find a bug, no matter how big or small, we want to fix it, especially any big ones, obviously. But we like fixing bugs. We don't want our product to have issues for you. We want everything to work. So again, if you have problems, let us know. We want to fix it. So I believe next we can start our walkthrough. So I will quick share my console here.
And sorry to interrupt, Mark, but I forgot to mention that if any of our viewers have any questions at all during this, there's a Q&A section on the bottom, so feel free to put your questions in there. Then we'll either answer them live or wait till the end and answer them there.
Awesome. Great ad, Scott. Thanks for chiming in there. All right. So let's start with these dashboards. So I'm going to start with these two controls at the top. You see, before we had, different dashboards have a combination of an OU picker and a collection picker. And before it was a simple combo box that had a list of OUs and a list of collections, and you had to search through there and select one. We had various feedback from customers. Some of them had like an obscene amount of OUs and didn't like to scroll through there. It was hard to search. Someone wanted to multi-select. So we took that to heart and made some changes. So here is our Active Directory OU picker. It will pre-populate with the domain that the user running the console is in. You can always go in, you can always go in here and change that domain if you like. After you change that, you hit this little refresh button, it'll repopulate all the OUs with the new domain. And then you can search through them all. It's got a little tree view. You can scroll up and down. You can check multiples. It'll automatically check any parent or child item. I'm sorry, any child items when you select the parent one, although you can always uncheck those later if you like. And then you can also search. So if I type in here, the search will find any OUs that match that name, as well as any parent or child items of that found search item. And then in the collection picker, it's pretty similar for Configuration Manager. It'll pre-populate, obviously, the site code and SMS provider of the site you're connected to with your console. You have the search function, and then you have all your collections as well as folders here. You kind of see how the folders are a little different with the folder icon. If you check one of the folders, it'll check every collection within that folder. So be careful with all these. You could accidentally run against many, many devices. So know what you're selecting, because if you're running against 100,000 devices, it'll be a little slower. But so once you select these, the and close the little combo box, essentially, it'll show either the name of what you've selected, or if you have a lot of them, it'll just say the number of items selected. And then, of course, you can do your little scan. Something else you might notice is once this scan completes, there's this little button up here called View Dashboard and Browser. So this is only going to show up on a couple of dashboards right now. We kind of just started this work. We're going to do some more on it in the future. What this basically is whenever you run this, it creates a snapshot of that data. So if you need to share it with, say, your manager, supervisor, the security team, some other team, you can then click this little button, and it's going to launch your browser and go to that snapshot. And you can just share this little URL with somebody, assuming they have permissions, and they can, drill into that and see the results of it. Brian's going to talk more about that later. We have talked about possibly changing this to a button where you can manually create a snapshot rather than having it automatic. We're still kind of debating the final product of this. So if you have any feedback on that, we'd love to hear it. Lastly, you might recall when we released the Remote Software Center, as well as the UI updates to system information and client information, we added some better error handling. And that's something we really want to slowly but surely add to the entire product, because we're not happy with error handling and making it clear when you're having problems in a lot of these tools. So there's this little UI here. So if you have an error pop up, it's going to show right down here at the bottom and make it a lot easier for you to troubleshoot, either by going to our documentation site that Marty maintains and does a very good job of, or if you, for some reason, need a support case because it's something a little more complex, then you can kind of help send that in the support case. As a better example, because this one doesn't have any errors, if we go over to the Bitlocker compliance dashboard, because I don't have MBAM in this environment, it throws a couple of errors saying SQL Server and MBAM database settings must be set to use this action. So basically this just shows unknown for MBAM because we don't have that configured. Speaking of the MBAM dashboard, we had someone ask if we can include the encryption method in the data grid down here in that webinar. So we added that in here. You can see that all these machines are encrypted using XTS AES 256, my favorite, of course. And then furthermore, if you need to launch the Bitlocker status tool from here for whatever reason, we made a few improvements to this. And this, I want to kind of preface this with, this is actually the, this is actually the first of many changes we have planned for this. We're going to be making some enhancements to this tool in the future, which I can't spoil too much of, because one, they're not all 100% decided on yet, and two, they're hopefully going to be some pretty big changes. But you'll see some basic start of some UI changes with just a little header here that matches the this client information, system information, and remote software center. We still have the data grid down here, but again, that'll be changing in the future. So if you right click on it, we've added a couple extra actions here at the bottom. The first of these new actions is force Bitlocker recovery and next restart. Essentially what this does is it deletes the TPM key protector. So when you restart the computer, it can't pull the key and it's going to force you at the Bitlocker recovery prompt screen. And we had a lot of users ask this. They had a few different reasons for wanting it. My favorite is always, I used to have something set up for this when a user departs and they're leaving. We would always have trouble getting their computer back from their department or manager. They always wanted to control the computer, even though it's IT's responsibility to manage these assets. And they would never give it back. They'd try to use it themselves or reassign to another person. So I always kick this off when that person left. And then obviously the manager would have to call, oh, this computer's not working. And then your help desk can be like, oh yeah, bring it in, we'll take care of it. Oh wait, that's supposed to be ours, thanks. So it's a little cool thing you use for that or other reasons. Regenerate recovery password for volume is the next one. As you probably know, if you're using MBAM or CM Bitlocker management, when you retrieve your key through their portal, it's automatically going to trigger that recovery password to rotate shortly thereafter. Basically, the reason being, if your end user writes down that recovery password on a post-it and puts it on their laptop, it's kind of circumventing all of your Bitlocker encryption, and it's not good. We had some users who basically wanted to be able to trigger this manually for whatever reasons. Maybe they're not using MBAM or CM Bitlocker management because there are other third-party utilities that can manage encryption, might not have this capability. Or maybe they just suspected some issues with it, but they wanted this ability. And this is just deleting the numerical password key protector, that's the recovery password, and re-adding it. So you have a new password on there. One thing you don't see here that we added it's actually an action in the back end in our plugins, but you can only really see it if you're using it in Builder, because that's the only place we thought it would be useful. We had some customers who were using their own custom system for managing Bitlocker recovery keys, and they wanted the ability to query the recovery key directly from the device. So we had a little action that will pull the key directly from the device, and so you can add that to a Builder workflow and kind of automate the pulling those keys and storing them if you need it for that purpose. So we're all done with these, and let's move on. Brian's going to show us a bit of an overview of the Recast management server.
So before we dig too deep into the Recast management server, I just want to do kind of a brief introduction to what the Recast management server is. If you're a community user or if you're a enterprise user running in standalone, you probably haven't heard of the Recast management server. And it's kind of important to understand as part of our overall product suite, in that the Recast management server initially was really just a central way of doing some administrative tasks. If you set up if you wanted to do permissions, for instance, you don't necessarily want every administrator to have access to run all of the Recast actions on every single device in your organization, similar to the way that configuration managers, RBA controls work. Right, we have a similar concept. If you're which only really comes into play in some of the more larger or more complex organizations. If you're a single administrator using configuration manager, then yeah, you don't really, you may not need the Recast management server. But what we've basically found over time is that if you come from the mindset of or the way that community works right now, it's always running the action within the console, or from that device that the console is running in the context of the user that's running that console. And over time, that's become less and less of a reality for a lot of organizations. They might have some untrusted domains, which means that your user isn't local, isn't trusted in these other domains, or they're trying to get rid of local administrative access, right, or trying to clamp down on that, who has access to run things as local admin. And some organizations are going even further. They're closing down things. They're shutting off things like remote registry, remote PowerShell, remote WMI, and the admin shares. And so all of those, we keep having customers that have those issues, and what we've tried to do is start working around those. And so Recast management server is the central point of that. So if we look at administration, I don't want to go too deep into what I was just talking about there, but we have an optional agent. We don't like agents. We're all system administrators here at Recast, at least on the dev team. We don't necessarily like agents, but hey, if you're shutting down remote registry and remote admin shares, like, well, if we can't reach out to that machine, then yeah, we're going to need some code on that machine that does reach out, that we can reach out to and talk. And so that's what the agent would be there for. And then it's a combination of proxies and routes, and I don't really want to get too deep into that, but that's what the Recast management server would provide you. If you find yourself in a scenario where, hey, I want to run these actions on these devices, but I can't, right, because of my environment, Recast management server is what's going to kind of get you there. And then we have Marty, who's doing Q&A today. If you find yourself in one of those situations, Marty would be happy to kind of walk you through how to kind of set that up. And we have a webinar, I think, already that kind of goes deeper into some of those things. But historically, again, the Recast management server has been about just centralizing the administrative things. And so in addition to things I'm talking about, we now have Audit Log. And so if you want to know who ran what actions on what devices, and including what the results are of those actions, that's what the Audit Log would do for you. Licensing, again, if you're just a one administrator shop, then okay, it doesn't really matter. But if we have customers that have 50 or 100 administrators, well, okay, you could manage the installs and the licensing across all those 50 users, or you can centralize that licensing concept with within the Recast management server. Permissions here is the other one. Again, if you have pretty classic split there, is if you have a desktop team versus a server team, you may want them to only be able to run right-click tools on certain collections or OUs, and that's what permissions and scopes would get you. So that super high level is what the Recast management server provides. And the other thing I'll mention here, if you are an enterprise customer and you are using Recast management server, you might notice here that the UI is a little revamped. We try to keep it looking working mostly the same, but basically in 4.4 we completely wrote the UI for Recast management server from the ground up. Basically, again, we're moving from a purely functional administrative thing to something that we think people are going to spend more time in, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But we realized that the framework we were using that we had built this UI in wasn't particularly great. It was kind of old and crusty, and so we had some technical debt. And Chris Muster, our lead team lead, and myself basically spent this whole release just doing that, trying to get this new framework in there. And there's a lot of little quirks in the old UI hopefully are resolved. If not, let us know. But we're going to just, it puts us in a much better place to make the Recast management server UI better and to do some of the things we want to do in here. And which leads me to the first thing, right? So the first thing that we're doing, that we did here to really make the Recast management server maybe something you would use more day to day, is to add these the dashboards and snapshots. So let's talk about the dashboards first. You can see here we have 3 in the actual 4.4 release. We're missing the Bitlocker dashboard. We kind of late in the game realized that there's the way that we had built the web version of it didn't match the in-console version, and so we're going to try and fix that for the next release. And you also notice that software update dashboard SUDS is missing here, which is sad to us as I'm sure it is to anyone who loves and uses SUDS. The problem with SUDS is the amount of data. So we've been having a bunch of conversations last week, this week, about how to deal with that. So absolutely SUDS is going to get in here somehow. We just have some technical challenges to work through and figure out. So the 2 that you'll see right now are the AD cleanup and the lapse dashboards. And our goal really was, nothing less of let's make it kind of look, feel, and work the same way that the in-console dashboard does. We really didn't want to have any compromise here. And so if you come here, you can see the same sort of selections that Mark showed you, right? We have the same multi-select options. I'm going to go ahead and select Recast workstations here. And same here, we can select a different collection. I'll do the Recast workstation collection. And then we can go ahead and run this report. And we get a graph that looks very much the same, and it works very much the same. If you have, if you're an organization where, hey, you have 99% of this all matches, then, these 2 things kind of become this little small slice up there. And so you can deselect that, and you can select the data here, and you can, just like in the our console versions, you're going to get the list of data down here. You can export it to a CSV file if you want to put it in Excel or ingest it somewhere else. A couple of things though that are here that are actually unique to the web dashboard. We were easily able to add a search component here, so I can look for stuff that doesn't exist, and that's not great. We can look for all our workstations. And then the other thing you can do here is you actually go full screen. So if you really want to kind of search through this data, if you got thousands of records, you may want a little more real estate to do that. And so we have this little expand button, which I thought was really kind of fun. And lastly, Mark showed you in the console creating a new snapshot, but here you can create a snapshot as well. And here it's a manual action. You're going to manually create a snapshot. You can give it a name. And I'm going to talk about snapshots here in just a second. But why did we build this? So this isn't, we don't really envision that the web dashboards would necessarily completely replace the in-console. If you're a SCCM administrator and you're using the console, continue to use the in-console dashboards. The idea here is we keep, every time we demo it, people say, well, we want to give it to our manager, or we want to, can I give this to another team, right? Maybe I have a separate AD, team, and I would want them to be able to run this report, yet I don't want to give them access, well, the console itself, let alone access within that console. The same thing with when we get software up to dashboard in here, right? Maybe that's the thing you want to give to your security team, right? Hey, here's our dashboard, and you guys can use it the same way we do, but removes that requirement to have the console. And so that's where we see this particular feature being used. But the snapshots that Mark mentioned when he was talking about it, what these are this. It's the exact same sort of experience, except there's some small differences. So this is based on static data. So I talked a bit about the audit log earlier, where we are auditing who's running what actions on what devices and what the results are. And so what our snapshots do is simply just refer to that audited or that saved data. So this data isn't going to change. You took a snapshot, and as long as that snapshot is in existence, that underlying data will be retained, and your manager or management, somebody can come in here and look at this snapshot, and the numbers aren't going to change. And yet, it's better than just a physical, captured image, right? They can dig down and they can go into this data. They can export it if they want to. All the things we were talking about before, they can do. The only thing they can't do is change, right? They can't change the options that we use. What OU, what collection. This, they can't change the parameters of this report, but they can use it just as interactively as you could. And I find that particularly compelling. Sure, you can give them a pretty graph, but I know some of my managers, not all of them, but some of them have wanted to be able to dig down into that data a little bit. And yet, so I think this is a great way of delivering that to them without allowing them to go ahead and change the parameters. The way that this functions is it's the exact same code. All we've really done is hidden the options at the top for them. So with that, that's what we've added to the Recast management server in 4.4. Again, a lot of it was sort of laying the groundwork for doing some other work. We're kind of excited about some stuff we can do in here. Like I said, we're going to add the other dashboards. We have some other kind of higher level managey kind of things we want to add in here. Create some trending data, I think, is high on the list. So there's all things we want to start working on and iterating as quickly as we can. So with that, I'm going to hand it off back to Scott.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Mark. To keep things going, right before we get to questions, I will show everyone the website, how to get 4.4 if you don't have it yet. If you don't have 4.4 yet, and you haven't had a enterprise trial, so I don't think, if you haven't downloaded since June, I believe, you'll get 14 days free access to enterprise, so you can test it out, try everything, see how it works in your own environment. I know we talked about things like our technical documentation, our blog a little bit on the webinar. So if you go to this drop down to resources, you can find our technical documentation, our blog. We talked a lot about feature requests. We spend a lot of time and effort looking at those. You can find those here as well. Submit your own, vote on others. And finally, if you liked what you saw today and you don't have enterprise yet, you can go to our pricing page and find out where to get pricing and get pricing here, and we'll be in contact with you. And as Mark said, our product specialists love to show off the tools. So if you're interested in getting a demo, a little bit more of a personalized show, you can go to our contact page and schedule an overview as well. With that, I will hand it over to Marty, and he can answer all of your guys' questions.
Excellent. Thanks, Scott. Hey, everybody. My name is Marty. I am the Customer Success Manager here at Recast Software. Great to have you here. We're available now to answer any questions that you may have. I did want to point out one thing that I posted in the chat for everybody. There are some permissions that are required for users to be able to see those snapshots that you create. So they'll need to be in the Recast Management Server and have permissions to get execution history for job ID and get action execution group, which are listed in that chat. Yeah, and if you have any other questions about how that stuff works, we can talk. You can ask the question now, and we can attempt to answer that for you. Or obviously, you can reach out to us in some of the ways that we showed. Send us an email, open a ticket, and we can help you out with that as well. So for now, any questions about the 4.4 release or anything else related to the right-click tools?
Does Zoom have sound effects for crickets?
You guys did such a good job of explaining our new features.
You can ask questions about unrelated to 4.4. Don't feel shy. I know a lot of people, especially when you're like presenting at MS or something, people are very hesitant to ask questions because they feel like it's a silly question. And never ever think that. If you have any question, by all means, we want to hear an answer. It's there aren't any silly questions. I know a couple of you out there actually have questions because I know one of you specifically.
Awesome. So we just had a question come in. Good work, Mark. It says, for enterprise, do you need
Way to
to have
guilt
the
them into
recast?
it. I like it.
Yeah. For enterprise, do you need to have the recast server? So the short answer is no, you don't necessarily need to have the recast server. You're going to get the added features that we kind of showed off by having the recast server, but you can also run in what we call a standalone setup. And in standalone, basically, each individual install on in your config manager console is kind of treated as its own thing. Actions run as in the context of the person who's logged into the console, and licensing is handled directly on that machine. So you need to have, add a license file to that device or download it for that device. But yeah, you absolutely can use enterprise without having the recast server. You're just missing out on some of the extra features that we've talked about.
There are some questions that someone put in chat as well, FYI.
Yeah,
Marty.
I see that. It would be nice. Here's the message was, it'd be nice to have the ability to disable and enable computers in AD from the right-click console tool. Your request has been heard. So I believe that's actually one of the things that is on our feature request page right now. Go ahead and vote it up. It is definitely something that we're looking at. Definitely something that we would. That's the kind of thing we look through the feature requests and we go, is this one of the kind of things that we would do? And yeah, absolutely, being able to disable or enable computers in AD from right-click tools, definitely something that we would do. So
Yeah,
go ahead and vote it up.
That one falls into the wait a minute, we don't already need it, or did you do
Yeah.
that category?
I thought we did
Like,
that.
So yeah, sometimes they're like, don't we do that? If not, why not?
We go through the feature request board. So we do our development in 2 week sprints, and we plan our next development sprint every 2 weeks, and we try to go through that board every development planning meeting. And when we went through that, we were all universally like, yes, we need to get this thing added. So I don't want to make any guarantees, but I'd be very surprised if we don't have that thing fairly soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Got a couple more questions coming in. So this was a follow-up question from our Recast Enterprise or Recast Management Server question. So what is the advantage of having the Recast Management Server? Okay, So what the Recast Management Server is going to allow you to do is you can use the tools in maybe what we would consider, we consider it a complex environment. So if you have multiple domains that have different trust rules or potentially different people that are maybe local admins on devices, you can actually run it so that different, you can set up proxies so that different service accounts or different user accounts can do different actions in those different devices. Awesome. We also have the audit log, so you can actually see who's doing actions and have a record of if the action was actually successful or not. And then also role-based authentication to the tools is a huge thing as well. So you can actually make it so that certain users or certain groups of users have more or less access to the right-click tools, so that you can actually limit down, what computers you can actually scope it down to, which computers maybe they are allowed to do things with, or which Active Directory they're allowed to do things with, things like that. On our documentation page, we do have also, it's docs.recastsoftware.com. We have some information about what the Recast Management Server does and what it has on it. So I'd also point you to there to take a look. Awesome. All right. Is there any impact in terms of performance resources within the installation of the remote client for each endpoint server? Also, what is the size of the client, as in the situation of homeworking? Thanks, team. I'm thinking we're probably talking about the Recast agent, and the Recast agent itself is a very small application that is running in the background. When it is actually running is the only time that you're actually going to see any performance that's being used on the device. And that also is going to be pretty minimal. If you see something different, if you see something different, please let us know, because it should be very minimal. So if you're seeing something different, please let us know. Go ahead and send in a ticket or email us or whatever. Because if it's doing more than just a little bit, we want to get on top of that.
Yeah, what I'll add is, in case it's relevant, I just looked at the MSI is just shy of 20 megabytes. If pushing that down to remote device, people working from home right now is a concern.
If you're currently using the agent, it would not hurt to upgrade. We had a bug we found with a memory leak in the agent that we fixed. It was not properly disposing of certain objects, and it was holding on to them in memory. And we were very concerned about that and fixed it ASAP as soon as we found that. So if you have any performance issues with that at all, let us know.
Awesome. Will there be more specific controls added for updating right-click tools if you have a management server? We have some systems that don't need to let users know that there will be a new version available, but others we'd like them to know that there's a new version available. Cool. Any chance there could be a built-in updater added to the software update so it can update itself? Okay, 2 questions. The first one, the ability to have maybe some users who know about an update and others don't, would be something that I would go ahead and put on our feature request board. It's actually not one that's on there currently, and I don't think that I have heard that one before, so that'd be a good one to throw up there.
I like that, though. I like that idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Any chance there could be a built-in updater to update the software to stay in line with the management server? That is also something that I believe is on the request board already. It is definitely something that we are looking at. On the list of things that we would possibly do, that is, we would probably do that. So it's one of the things that we're looking at. It's hopefully going to be a feature soon. We don't have a time frame at this point.
Regardless of it being the feature soon, I would definitely recommend not only voting it up, but if there are, you can comment on the feature requests and any specifics you want to see, because I think one of the biggest debates we've been having lately is to what extent and how do we do this. One of the scenarios was like maybe we put in a built-in Recast Management Server updating service similar to what the Configuration Manager console does, and then let the Recast Management Server update agents, proxies, and right-click tools installs from there. It could be that shape or another shape or form. So any comments from our customers of what exactly they'd want to see would be super helpful, because we would like to do that in some way. We just need to figure out what that's going to look like essentially.
And I just
Good.
threw a link to that specific feature request, which I may or may not have written myself, because yes, we want to do that.
Awesome. If the dev team writes the request, it must be good, right? Cool. So there was a question that I missed in chat earlier. Can the 4.4 agent be installed over top of 4.3? Yes, all of our tools should be able to be installed over the top of them. They will do basically an upgrade install when you run the installer, keep the information that it already has, and do an upgrade over the top. An agent will also work as doing an upgrade install.
Yeah. But what I'll say, that like we're all system administrators. Like that's all of the I mean, that's the background of the support and dev team. I take install failures personally for that reason.
So if you find one, let us know.
Yeah, we take it personally.
Sounds good. Speaking of in terms of permissions, it would be nice to have a map to what SCCM permissions are needed. Yeah, permissions all around are something that I'd like to find a better way to do in our documentation. Right now, for each of the actions that you're trying to run, there should be a list, if you look in our docs site, where you can actually find information about each of the actions. There should be a list of recast permissions that are required and the Microsoft permissions that are required. And Microsoft will also show what you need maybe in Active Directory if it's an Active Directory thing, or what you need in Config Manager if it's a Config Manager thing. I'd like to make that better. Right now, we're thinking about it. We're trying to figure out how that could be a little bit better. But each of the actions should have what permissions are needed to make those actions happen.
Yeah, and we've had that discussion internally, and like our goal would be to find some sort of way to kind of automate that, because the way it kind of works is like we'll have a particular tool. Take the ping tool. That tool might call multiple different actions on the back end for recast, and then take those results and put them together. So, and it's those actions that ultimately are going to be the thing that needs permissions into Config Manager. So it's kind of this. It ends up being this kind of tree of figuring out what all the permissions are tied to a particular tool. And so we've had some discussion. We got to figure out how to not make Marty do that by hand. We want it to be kind of like self-documenting.
I'm laughing at Brian for choosing the worst tool as an example for that. The ping tool
Yeah, I know.
is
I
one
know.
action. It doesn't use Configuration Manager. It's a very simple tool. Although actually, I guess, well, never mind.
I'm
The
terrible
system
at picking
information-
examples.
System information is a good example, right?
Yeah.
Or Remote Software Center, because it's got
Right.
numerous server calls in to get the data from the different sources. And then if you're actually running an action like install software or something like that, it's a whole nother action / permission you need. So we could automate this. We should figure out a good way to do that. We could maybe build something into each tool where you click a button, but we need to look at that. Marty, I noticed there was one other question, both in Q&A as well as in chat, that I was going to ask you if you'd mind if I answered that, because it's kind of a two-part question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So the question was, can the Recast management server be set up in Azure? So there are two parts to this I want to talk about. The first part is, do you have an Azure VM that's connected to your on-prem environment, and you just want to basically put it in that Azure VM? And the answer is yes, but it's not currently configured. You don't want to expose this to the internet right now. That's something we've been talking about doing in the future, is setting it up so you can have this as like a service in Azure, and it can reach out directly to clients. Being able to reach out to devices over the CMG is kind of a workaround to that right now. So if you have devices over the CMG, we can route actions through the fast channel and do it that way. But you don't want to expose the Recast management server to the internet right now. I mean, obviously, if it's on a server that has internet access, that's one thing, that's fine. But we need to do a few prereqs before we're able to put that thing fully online. If you want to see the Recast management server and be able to route actions to devices over the internet without the cloud management gateway, put in a feature request, because we've talked about this and we want to do it. It's more where it is in our priority list. I personally want to see it higher on the priority list, but there are other items that we'd also have to push back if we did that. So if you want to see that, by all means vote it up in future requests.
Yeah, and one of the ways that we determine what gets on this priority list that we're talking about is it's feature requests. Like the more it's voted up, the more we know that people are interested in it. And then that's something that maybe we do put something else on hold, maybe to make this feature happen just because it's overwhelmingly obvious that people want it to happen.
Yeah, we want to make stuff our customers want.
Right.
But yeah, by all means, right now, if you want to put in like an Azure VM to be, use with your on-prem environment, go for it. Just don't make it fully exposed to the internet. We need to separate out some of the services. Right now, it's one web service, but if we put it that way, we want to pull out the administration and authentication services into separate services so that they're not exposed. So it would not be a good idea to put it fully exposed in there right now.
Is the agent included with management server, or is that an additional cost? Great question. I was going to actually bring this up earlier, and I completely slipped my mind. So all of the things that we've shown and the things that we've talked about would be part of the enterprise suite. The Recast right-click tools enterprise suite. The only things that are separate right now are those the automation platform that we talked about, and the Kiosk Manager part that we talked about. The other things that we have, if you are looking to do it and you're already an enterprise customer, you're good to go. If you are thinking of becoming an enterprise customer, it would be all part of that. Right. I am going to now pass it off to Scott.
Awesome. Thank you, Marty, for helping all and answering all of those questions. Thank you, Mark and Brian, for walking us and showing us through the new features. And with that, we will end the webinar. We'll be sending out a recording in case you guys miss anything and want to watch it back again. Or if you want to share with anybody on your team, you can also feel free to send it along. But thank you, everyone, for coming, and we look forward to hearing from you. Bye.